When we think about the Cold War, the usual images are geopolitical: tanks rolling through Berlin, missiles in Cuba, or spy planes over Moscow. But the Cold War wasn't just about superpowers posturing. It was a global battleground for ideology, where the struggle for freedom, equality, and justice took many forms. A little while ago, we talked about the Weather Underground, a radical leftist organization formed in the United States in the 1960s who proposed using violence to remove the US government as a proponent of capitalist and imperialist aggression. And there are other multiple examples of American domestic organizations who look to bring about change, not by means of the ballot box. I'm your host David, and today we are going to look at one of the most striking examples of these organizations, a revolutionary organization started in the streets of Oakland, California, but whose influence stretched across continents: the Black Panther Party. This is the Cold War. We're going to start this story on the west coast of the United States in 1966. Oakland, California was a city simmering with racial tension, systemic inequalities, and state-sanctioned violence. For Black Americans, daily life meant navigating the dual threats of economic disenfranchisement and unchecked police brutality. It was in this environment that Huey Newton and Bobby Seale founded the Black Panther Party for self-defense, an organization that was as bold in its tactics as it was transformative in its vision. And the founding of the BPP wasn't an impulsive reaction to isolated incidents. It was a calculated response to decades of systemic oppression, a deliberate move to reclaim dignity and agency for Black communities. The Panthers' first major action was organizing armed patrols to monitor police behavior, an act as provocative as it was necessary. At the time, California's open carry laws permitted citizens to carry firearms in public, and Newton and Seale leveraged this legal right to assert their community's right to defend itself. These patrols weren't acts of vigilante justice, they were acts of visibility and accountability. The sight of disciplined, armed Black men and women observing police officers fundamentally disrupted the balance of power in a way that was both symbolic and practical. It sent an unmistakable message: we are here, we are watching, and we will not be silent. But to reduce the Panthers' early actions to mere displays of militancy would miss the breadth of their vision. Newton and Seale understood that true liberation required more than defending against state violence. It required a comprehensive strategy to address the systemic roots of inequality. This understanding was enshrined in their 10-point program, a revolutionary manifesto that outlined their demands for justice, equality, and basic human rights. The 10-point program was as pragmatic as it was visionary. It called for an end to police brutality, but also demanded access to decent housing, quality education, and employment for Black Americans. It denounced the systemic exploitation of Black communities and insisted on self-determination, encapsulating the Panthers' belief that Black people must have the power to shape their own futures. These weren't abstract ideals, they were urgent necessities for survival. For a population that had been systematically marginalized, the program offered both a critique of the present and a blueprint for a better future. And the Panthers' demands weren't confined to domestic issues, they were explicitly international in scope. They linked the struggle of Black Americans to the anti-colonial movements sweeping across Africa and Asia, drawing parallels between the systemic racism of the US and the exploitative practices of colonial powers. Newton and Seale recognized that the conditions faced by Black Americans weren't unique, they were part of a broader system of global oppression. Despite their revolutionary aspirations, the Panthers' early days were met with a mix of awe, fear, and misunderstanding. For many in Oakland's Black community, the sight of young armed men and women standing up to the police was nothing short of revolutionary. For local authorities, however, it was a direct challenge to the status quo, one that would soon escalate into open hostility. Yet Newton and Seale remained undeterred, committed to building a movement that could serve as both a shield and a sword, a defense against injustice and a weapon for systemic change. The Black Panther Party is often remembered for its striking imagery: black berets, leather jackets, and armed patrols challenging police brutality. Yet their community programs were just as revolutionary. These initiatives weren't acts of charity, but deliberate strategies to address systemic neglect and empower Black communities. For the Panthers, true liberation meant not just resisting the old system, but building a better one in its place. One of the Panthers' most iconic initiatives was the Free Breakfast for Children program, launched in 1969. By 1971, it was serving tens of thousands of meals daily across the country. While alleviating food insecurity was vital, the program also fostered care, solidarity, and community resilience. It demonstrated that Black communities could provide for themselves where the government had failed. As Panther leader Elaine Brown put it, the goal was to inspire people to imagine securing not just breakfast, but housing, healthcare, and ultimately, freedom. Healthcare was another cornerstone of the Panthers' activism. They established nationwide free clinics, offering screenings for conditions like high blood pressure and lead poisoning. Their campaign to address sickle cell anemia, a disease largely ignored by the healthcare system, raised national awareness and secured federal funding. For the Panthers, healthcare wasn't a privilege, it was a fundamental human right. Beyond food and healthcare, the Panthers' survival programs tackled a range of issues, from distributing clothing and groceries to providing legal aid and tenant advocacy. Their schools taught African American history alongside traditional subjects, filling gaps left by mainstream education. These programs didn't just meet immediate needs, they showed how communities could build alternatives to oppressive systems. Every meal served, every clinic opened, and every legal case won was an opportunity to educate and organize. The Panthers' programs demonstrated the power of self-determination, proving that communities could create their own solutions. By addressing systemic neglect, the Panthers provided a blueprint for revolutionary change, making liberation a tangible, achievable reality. Now, the rise of the Black Panther Party coincided with a transformative era in American journalism. The late 1960s and early 1970s ushered in new journalism, a style that prioritized dramatic storytelling and personal perspectives over traditional reporting. While this approach brought national and global attention to the Panthers, it often came at the cost of sensationalism. Mainstream media fixated on the most provocative aspects of the Panthers' image, their black berets, leather jackets, and visible firearms, emphasizing their militant rhetoric while downplaying their community programs. For many Americans, the Panthers were portrayed less as activists, feeding children, or providing healthcare, and more as a militant force clashing with police. This distorted framing fueled the perception that the Panthers were more about violence than justice. This misrepresentation aligned neatly with government efforts to discredit the Panthers. FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover saw the Panthers' visibility and success as a threat, labeling them, quote, the greatest threats to internal security. Hoover's fear wasn't just their rhetoric, but also the success of their community programs, particularly the Free Breakfast program. These initiatives undermined narratives of Black dependency, exposed systemic neglect, and offered a compelling model of self-reliance and care. The FBI's counterintelligence program, COINTELPRO, made the Panthers one of its primary targets. Hoover authorized surveillance, infiltration, and sabotage designed to dismantle the organization. Agents infiltrated the Panthers to sow distrust, spread false information to create internal divisions, and forged letters to pit leaders against each other. Smear campaigns and planted stories further eroded their credibility. Community programs were not spared. The FBI recognized the political power of Panther-run clinics, schools, and breakfast programs, which built solidarity and directly addressed community needs. These initiatives were subjected to raids, closures, and harassment under the guise of law enforcement. The goal was clear: to disrupt the Panthers' ability to serve their communities and weaken their base of support. Through these coordinated efforts, the media and the government created a distorted image of the Panthers while systematically undermining their work. Yet even under this pressure, the Panthers' programs and ideology left an enduring legacy of resistance and empowerment. The Black Panther Party wasn't confined to addressing local injustice. It was a revolutionary force that linked the oppression of African Americans to the broader struggle of colonized and marginalized people worldwide. This internationalist vision set the Panthers apart from many other civil rights organizations of their time. By framing their fight as part of a global struggle against imperialism, colonialism, and capitalism, they elevated their activism from a domestic campaign to a worldwide phenomenon. Members of the BPP were not only the targets of federal law enforcement, but also local authorities who also worked to undermine the organization. A supposed shootout between members of the BPP and the Chicago police in December of 1969 resulted in the deaths of 21-year-old Fred Hampton and 22-year-old Mark Clark. While the official reports from the police and the Attorney General indicated that the shootout was initiated by BPP members, independent investigations by journalists and a later federal grand jury showed gross inconsistencies in the police evidence and testimony. 8 Chicago PD officers were indicted by that grand jury, but all the charges were then dismissed. Much of the violent image of the Black Panther Party derived from instances when law enforcement targeted members and the BPP stood up for themselves in self-defense, resulting in armed standoffs, shooting, and even firebombing. The Panthers did not advocate violence as the primary means to initiate change, but they did not shy away from violent conflict if it presented itself. Now, some of you unfamiliar with the Panthers may be wondering why the overt hostility that they faced from the government organizations. After all, they were working to uplift their communities on their own. After all, that's supposed to be the American way, isn't it? Well, central to their ideology was revolutionary nationalism, shaped by the writings of Frantz Fanon, Mao Zedong, and Malcolm X. Fanon's The Wretched of the Earth dissected how colonial systems exploited and dehumanized people, providing a philosophical foundation for resistance. Mao's principles of mass mobilization and self-reliance offered practical organizing strategies, while Malcolm X's insistence on human rights over civil rights and his call for global solidarity deeply resonated. The Panthers adopted these ideas, positioning African Americans as part of a global third world, confronting shared systems of exploitation. They were revolutionary leftists, and therefore, certainly during the Cold War, viewed as dangerous ideologues and enemies of the US state. Now, the international framework of the BPP's ideology allowed the Panthers to articulate African Americans' condition as an internal colony within the United States, drawing direct parallels to the experiences of colonized people in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. For the Panthers, police brutality wasn't just local violence, it was a manifestation of systemic state control, mirroring the repression used by colonial regimes. The Vietnam War further underscored these parallels. The Panthers argued that the same government waging an unjust war abroad was simultaneously oppressing Black Americans at home, exposing the hypocrisy of a nation claiming to defend freedom internationally while denying it domestically. And the Panthers' internationalism wasn't confined to theory. Leaders like Elaine Brown became pivotal voices on the global stage, bridging the party's domestic goals with worldwide movements. In 1970, Brown participated in the People's Anti-Imperialist Delegation, traveling to China, North Korea, and North Vietnam alongside Eldridge Cleaver and other Panthers. This trip left a profound impression on Brown, who observed significant social and economic progress in these nations. She reflected that, for the first time in her life, she felt treated as a respected human being, a stark contrast to the systemic dehumanization experienced by Black people in America. Brown's experience in Asia reinforced her belief in the connection between the Black struggle in the US and the global fight against imperialism. However, her time abroad also revealed tensions within the BPP's leadership. Brown became critical of Cleaver's authoritarian approach, accusing him of dictatorial behavior and noting his push for more violent tactics, which clashed with the Oakland-based leadership's focus on survival programs. This internal division highlighted the broader challenge of balancing global revolutionary solidarity with addressing immediate community needs at home. When Brown became the party's leader in 1975, she redirected its energy towards achieving political and economic control in Oakland. This shift marked a strategic pivot from the internationalism emphasized by Cleaver to a focus on electoral politics and community-based initiatives. Brown's leadership highlighted a pragmatic approach to activism, prioritizing survival programs and local empowerment while adapting to the challenges of public perception and relentless government repression. The Panthers' ability to inspire and connect with global movements was reflected in their influence across West Germany, South Africa, and Northern Ireland. In West Germany, student activists drew on the Panthers' critique of imperialism and their emphasis on self-determination, linking their resistance to the Panthers' vision of liberation. In South Africa, anti-apartheid activists admired the Panthers' blend of militant rhetoric and practical community programs, adapting these strategies to their fight against racial and economic exploitation. In Northern Ireland, civil rights leaders found inspiration in the Panthers' defiance of state violence and focus on community empowerment, adopting similar approaches in their struggle for equality and autonomy under British rule. The Panthers didn't just inspire from afar, they actively cultivated relationships through initiatives like the establishment of an international chapter in Algiers in 1969. This chapter served as a hub for global solidarity, connecting the Panthers with revolutionary leaders and movements across Africa and Asia. Elaine Brown's leadership, shaped by her global experiences and commitment to local priorities, encapsulates the dual nature of the Black Panther Party's legacy. Under her direction, the party transitioned towards addressing community needs while maintaining its revolutionary spirit, emphasizing the interconnectedness of local and global struggles. The Panthers' transnational influence redefined resistance, showing that the fight for justice transcends national borders and requires solidarity and cooperation. From Oakland to Algiers, West Germany to South Africa, and Northern Ireland to North Vietnam, the Panthers demonstrated that true liberation is a shared global endeavor. Their legacy continues to inspire movements worldwide, reminding us that the struggle for freedom is universal and solidarity is one of the most powerful tools for confronting oppression. So, what happened to them? Well, the Panthers' decline in the late 1970s was due to a combination of internal divisions, relentless government repression, and shifting political landscapes. But their impact didn't end with their dissolution in 1982. Today, movements like Black Lives Matter draw directly from the Panthers' playbook, using direct action, community programs, and social media to challenge systemic injustice. The Panthers' emphasis on self-determination and their framing of civil rights as human rights remain as relevant as ever. Perhaps their greatest legacy is their demonstration that change is possible, even in the face of overwhelming odds. They showed that activism isn't just about resistance, it's about building something better, a thought that seems ever more relevant in the present day. We hope you've enjoyed this episode, and to make sure you don't miss our future work, please make sure you're subscribed to our channel and have pressed the bell button in solidarity with other revolutionary bell buttons struggling for equality and justice around the world. Please consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/thecoldwar or through YouTube membership. We can be reached via email at thecoldwarchannel@gmail.com. This is The Cold War Channel, and as we think about the Cold War, please remember that history is shades of gray and rarely black and white.